On a frozen mountainside in the Soviet Union, searchers found a tent half buried in snow. It had been slashed open, not from the outside, but from within. Whatever was inside had been in such a hurry to escape that they had cut through the canvas with a knife rather than use the door, and they had run out into a night of 40 below zero. Most of them without coats, some without boots, some barely dressed at all. 9 experienced hikers fleeing something in the dark. Days later, they were all dead, and what was done to some of their bodies has never been fully explained. This is the mystery of the Dyatlov Pass. In late January of 1959, 10 young hikers set out from a town in the Ural Mountains. Most were students, fit, seasoned, and confident on winter terrain. They were led by a capable 23-year-old named Igor Dyatlov. Their goal was an ambitious cross-country ski trek through the frozen wilderness of the northern Urals. This was not a group of amateurs wandering into danger. They were certified, experienced, and well-equipped. Several were aiming to earn the highest hiking rank in the Soviet system. One member turned back early because of illness, a decision that would save his life and leave him, for the rest of it, haunted by the question of what he had escaped. The remaining 9 pressed on into increasingly remote country, keeping careful diaries and taking photographs as they went. Those photos would later become chilling evidence. Their route would take them over a high, exposed pass and up the slopes of a mountain the local indigenous people called Kholat Shakhl. In their language, the name meant something unsettling: Dead Mountain. On the 1st of February, the group climbed toward the pass. Bad weather and poor visibility pushed them off course, and they gained too much altitude out onto an open, wind-scoured slope. Rather than lose ground by descending to the shelter of the forest, Dyatlov made a decision. They would pitch their tent right there, on the exposed side of Dead Mountain, and wait out the night. It was a reasonable choice for hardened hikers. They dug the tent into the snow, settled in, ate, and prepared to sleep. And that is the last certain thing anyone knows. When the group failed to return on schedule, family members raised the alarm. A search was launched, and weeks later, rescuers reached that lonely slope. What they found made no sense. The tent was still standing, half collapsed under snow, and it had been cut open from the inside with a knife. Everything the hikers needed to survive was still there. Boots, coats, food, supplies, all left behind. Whatever had driven them out had left no time to dress. Leading away from the tent, faintly preserved in the snow, were footprints, 8 or 9 sets of them, made by people in socks or bare feet, walking, not running in panic, down toward the tree line. The searchers followed the trail down the slope, a full mile, to the edge of a forest. There, beneath a tall cedar tree, they found the remains of a small fire, and near it the first 2 bodies. 2 young men lying in their underwear, frozen. Above them, branches of the cedar were broken high up, as if someone had desperately climbed for a view, or for anything. Between the cedar and the tent, spread out along the route back uphill, they found 3 more, including the leader, Igor Dyatlov, one hand frozen around a small branch, as though he had died trying to crawl back to the shelter he had fled. These 5 had died of hypothermia, the cruel, quiet death of freezing. Underdressed in brutal cold, that much at least seemed to make a terrible kind of sense. But 4 of the hikers were still missing, and it would take months until the spring thaw before the snow gave them up. What it revealed only deepened the mystery. The final 4 were found in a ravine, buried under deep snow in a stream bed, some distance from the others, and their condition was nothing like the first 5. Some were better dressed, wearing clothing that, investigators realized, had been cut from the bodies of those who died first. In the dark and the cold, the survivors had taken clothes from the dead to try to live. But it was their injuries that turned a tragedy into an enduring mystery. 2 of them had massive fractures to the chest. 1 had a shattered skull. The force required to cause such injuries, doctors said, was immense, comparable to a high-speed car crash or a great fall. Yet there were almost no external wounds, no broken skin over the broken bones. It was as if they had been crushed by an enormous pressure without being struck by anything that left a mark. Nothing about it fit a simple accident. And then there was the detail that has haunted the case ever since. 1 of the women was found missing her tongue and her eyes. For decades, that single fact fed the darkest theories imaginable. Something, people whispered, had been done to her. Something deliberate, something inhuman. The official Soviet investigation ran for months, then closed abruptly. Its conclusion was strange and unsatisfying. that the hikers had died from a compelling natural force that the investigators could not name. The case files were sealed. The area was closed to hikers for years, and in the silence left behind, the theories multiplied, each stranger than the last. Some blamed an avalanche, but the tent was still standing, the slope seemed too gentle, and the footprints leading away were calm and deliberate, not the chaos of men buried alive. Some blamed the military. Rumors spread of secret weapons tests, of strange orange lights seen in the sky that same night by other groups far away, of radiation found on some of the clothing. Some blamed the local indigenous people, a theory quickly disproven as there was no sign of any other human being anywhere near that slope. And some, unable to accept any earthly answer, blamed things that do not have names. The mountain of the dead, they said, had simply taken them. But strip away the legends, and a chain of terrible human moments begins to appear. A picture not of monsters, but of 9 people facing a night that turned against them. Imagine it. The group is asleep in the tent, high on the exposed slope, in total darkness, in appalling cold. And something makes them believe all at once that to stay is to die. Perhaps a sudden crack in the snow above them, a slab of hardened snow shifting, threatening to bury the tent. In that instant, half asleep and terrified, they choose the only escape they can reach, the wall of the tent and a knife. They spill out into the dark, underdressed, and make the one disciplined decision they can. They move together, downhill, away from the danger, toward the shelter of the trees a mile below. But now they are exposed to the real killer, not a monster. The cold. In 40 below, without coats, the body begins to fail within minutes. At the cedar tree, they try to build a fire, to climb for firewood, to survive. 2 of them die there first, and their clothes are taken by the others who still cling to life. Some try to go back for the tent and the gear that means survival, and freeze on the slope as they crawl. And the last 4 shelter in the ravine where the deep snow itself may have collapsed on them. That crushing weight of snow and ice, some scientists now argue, could explain the massive internal injuries with no external wounds, and the missing tongue and eyes, the most horrifying detail of all, are, in cold reality, what happens to a body left exposed in a wet, thawing stream for weeks. It is a grim, natural explanation, and in recent years, modeling of exactly this kind of delayed snow slab has offered the most convincing answer the case has ever had. But here is why the Dyatlov Pass will never truly be solved. Every rational theory explains most of the facts and leaves at least one that does not quite fit. Why did such experienced hikers, who knew that leaving the tent meant death, cut their way out anyway? What did they see or hear in that tent that made a certain freezing death outside seem like the better choice? We have their diaries, their photographs, the position of every body, the cut in the canvas. We have everything except the one thing that matters, the last few hours inside their minds. The final frames on their cameras show only darkness and blurred, ambiguous shapes that people have argued over for more than 60 years without agreement. 9 young people climbed a mountain called Dead Mountain, full of ambition and life, and something on that slope, in the dark, unmade them one by one. They were not careless, they were not weak, they were among the best prepared people you could send into those mountains. And it was not enough. That is the real horror of the Dyatlov Pass. Not that a monster was waiting for them, but that the cold, the dark, and a single moment of terror can undo even the strongest and leave behind a mystery that outlives everyone who might have solved it. Somewhere on that quiet, wind-scoured slope, the answer is still frozen in the snow, and the mountain of the dead has never once offered it up.